The revolving glass doors of the Regal Meridian Hotel caught my reflection for just a fleeting moment before I stepped through. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in that simple black dress. My hair was pulled back tightly, and I wore no flashy jewelry. For 30 years, I had mastered the art of disappearing in plain sight, and tonight was supposed to be no different. At least, that was the plan. My brother, Evan, stood near the towering champagne fountain with his wife, Delilah. Both were draped in designer labels and wore the kind of false smiles that only money can buy. My parents flanked them like sentinels, their eyes constantly scanning the room for anyone they deemed worth impressing. When they finally spotted me approaching, something shifted in their expressions. It wasn't recognition, it was something closer to alarm. "Excuse me, are you the help?" Evan asked, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "Staff should use the side entrance." I stopped walking. The words hit me like ice water, but I kept my face a mask of stillness. My own brother, standing only 3 feet away, was pretending he had never shared a childhood with me. He was acting as if we hadn't grown up in the same house, or as if I hadn't worked double shifts to pay my own way through college while he borrowed thousands from our parents. Delilah stepped forward, scanning me from head to toe with the kind of look people reserve for stains on expensive furniture. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern, "staff uniforms are supposed to be navy. You are completely out of dress code." I looked at my mother, hoping for a flicker of maternal instinct, but she simply adjusted her pearls and looked away. My father cleared his throat, leaning in to whisper harshly, "What are you doing here, Elena? This is a high-profile gala for the city's elite. You don't belong here, and you're embarrassing your brother in front of his investors." They truly didn't see me. To them, I was just a shadow, a failure who had chosen a life of quiet hard work over their world of vanity and greed. They had no idea that the help they were dismissing was actually the most important person in the room. Growing up in the shadow of the perfect family had been an exercise in endurance. My parents poured every resource into Evan, believing he was the only one capable of carrying on the family legacy. I was the quiet one, the one who stayed in the library while they went to country clubs. When it came time for university, the funds were suddenly tight for me, yet there was always enough for Evan's luxury cars and failed business ventures. I learned early on that if I wanted a life, I would have to build it with my own 2 hands. I worked 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load, eventually earning a degree in architectural engineering. While my family spent their weekends at galas, I was on construction sites and in design studios, learning how the world was actually built. I started my own firm under a pseudonym, the Meridian Group. I didn't want my father's name or his help to touch my work. I wanted to see if I could stand on my own. 4 years, I lived in a tiny apartment, pouring every cent back into the company. I watched from afar as Evan ran my father's real estate firm into the ground with reckless decisions and ego-driven projects. They thought I was struggling. Every Christmas, they would hand me a small envelope of cash with a look of pity, telling me to buy something nice for the office. They didn't realize that my office now occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper they couldn't even afford to rent in. The irony was delicious. My father's firm was currently facing bankruptcy, and their only hope was a massive redevelopment contract for the city's historic district. They were at this gala tonight to meet the CEO of the company that held the power to grant that contract. They were waiting for a savior, never dreaming that the savior was the daughter they had just told to use the side entrance. I felt the weight of the contract in my clutch, the final signature that would decide their fate. The gala continued, a blur of silk and hollow laughter. I moved to the back of the room, sipping water and watching my family perform. My father was cornering a group of investors, his voice booming with a confidence he didn't actually possess. Evan was trailing behind him, nodding like a puppet. They looked desperate, though they tried to hide it under layers of cologne and arrogance. Finally, the master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "tonight we celebrate the future of our city. We are honored to announce the lead developer for the New Century project. Please welcome the founder and CEO of the Meridian Group." My father and Evan straightened their ties, clearly expecting a man in a power suit to walk onto the stage. Instead, I stepped out from the shadows. I walked slowly, the heels of my shoes clicking against the marble floor like a ticking clock. As I ascended the stairs to the podium, I could see my family in the front row. The color drained from my father's face. Evan's jaw literally dropped, his glass of champagne tilting dangerously in his hand. Delilah looked as if she had seen a ghost. I leaned into the microphone, my voice steady and cold. "Thank you," I said, looking directly at my father. The Meridian Group started with a simple vision, that true strength is built from the ground up, without shortcuts and without pretending to be something you aren't. We value hard work over heritage. I saw my mother cover her mouth with her hand. The realization was hitting them like a physical blow. The daughter they had mocked, the sister they had called the help just an hour ago, was the one holding the keys to their survival. I didn't feel the rush of anger I expected. Instead, I felt a profound sense of peace. The silence in the room was absolute as the elite of New York realized that the Holloway dynasty was over, and a new era had begun. After the announcement, the gala shifted. People who had ignored me all night were suddenly crowding around, trying to hand me their business cards. I ignored them all, heading straight for the private lounge where my family was waiting. The air in the room was thick with tension. "Elena," my father started, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have worked together. We're family." "Family?" I asked, tilting my head. "Is that what we were when you told me I was an embarrassment? Or when Evan told me to use the service entrance? You didn't want a daughter, you wanted a subordinate. And when I didn't fit that mold, you decided I didn't exist." Evan tried to step forward, his face flushed with shame. "Look, we were stressed. We didn't mean it. But this contract, it could save the firm. You have to sign the partnership agreement with us." I pulled the document from my bag. It was the contract that would have merged our interests and saved my father's legacy. I looked at the signature line, then looked at the three people who had spent decades trying to make me feel small. "I've spent 30 years learning how to be invisible for you," I said quietly. "Tonight, I'm finally leaning into the light. But I'm doing it alone." I didn't rip the contract. That would have been too dramatic, too much like them. Instead, I simply placed it back in my bag, unsigned. "I've decided to award the subcontracts to firms that actually value their employees. Your firm doesn't meet my standards." As I walked out of the Regal Meridian Hotel, the cold night air felt refreshing rather than bitter. My phone buzzed with a dozen frantic messages, but I silenced it. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching the snow begin to fall over the city. I wasn't the help, and I wasn't the failure. I was finally just Elena. My worth was no longer a question to be answered by people who never knew how to value me. The revenge wasn't in their ruin, it was in my own absolute freedom.